the Young Turks, directly from the pages of Newsweek magazine, Michael Hirsh.
All right, back on the Young Turks with Michael Hirsh. Michael, how are you?
Good. How are you, Jake?
Great. Another very interesting piece you've written here, Legislating a Conscience on Wall Street. Let's talk about Goldman Sachs' testimony yesterday on the Hill. They kept claiming that they were just innocent market makers. Can you explain what that means?
Well, that's when you go in and you basically become the transaction maker for both sides. When someone wants to buy a certain kind of security, you put up the capital, you create the security, you offer it at a certain price, you buy. You buy it yourself and sell it. You take the other side of the transaction, and you do that over and over again. And it's the kind of thing that became increasingly central into Wall Street and profitable for companies like Goldman Sachs as the age of structured finance and derivatives really took off.
But Michael, here's the thing I don't understand. Like in the old days, the investment bankers would facilitate these trades, right? And I thought that's what it meant to be a market maker. Like for example, the Abacus deal, the one that they're in trouble for, is actually a classic example of that. John Paulson wants one side of it, ACA wants the other side, and Goldman Sachs sets it up and takes some money for their trouble. Okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But it seems like that's not all they were doing. They were actually taking one side of the bet. So then they're not making a market, they're part of the market. Isn't that right?
Well, they're both making it and they're part of it. And they claim that, look, I mean, that's the way they stay alive and maintain their viability as a company is to make sure that all their risks are hedged when they're a market maker. But I mean, the key distinction here and what was not being understood fully, I think, in this hearing, and where you had a real culture clash between Washington and Wall Street, was that the senators expected that Goldman was going to be acting in the best interests of its clients. That's the question you kept heard being asked. And that's not the way investment banking at companies like Goldman Sachs works anymore. And Lloyd Blankfein, did try to explain that. It's not about going to an investment banker like in the old days of J.P. Morgan and getting the best advice on what you should do and what you should invest in. That's not why clients go to Goldman Sachs today, and that's the point that I think Blankfein and the others were trying to make.
So it's not even that they're not concerned with the best interests of their so-called clients; it's that they're actively betting against them. I mean. But as part of the normal transaction, I mean, the other guy gets that Goldman Sachs is betting against them, right? Or do they not understand?
Well, no. I mean, I think that's part of the problem here, and I think that's where Carl Levin, the senator chairing the hearing, and others, have a point. It's like, okay, if you guys are going to do this, if you're going to set up these transactions, and as in the case of this Abacus deal and other deals in the late stages of the subprime bubble, you think that they're going to go down. You think that they're going to decline in value, and you're going to spend most of your time in one of these deals, revealed in the emails that Carl Levin brought out. Goldman had bought the entire $2 billion worth of hedges against the deal. They had short, they were the entire short side of the deal. I think that what we need are rules that say you've got to disclose that. You, Goldman Sachs, have to tell a client, look, another part of our company is shorting this deal, and at least that information will be out there. And if the transaction parties still want to go into the deal, fine. But I mean, the point is to get that information out there, and I think that's what Carl Levin was really honing in on. It's like, isn't there a conflict of interest if you're not revealing this information?
That goes to my point about the AIG backdoor bailout, because I see this Abacus deal that they're in trouble for as the tip of the iceberg. I see the iceberg as the $13 billion that they got from AIG. Now, from my understanding, that was them betting against the mortgage market, and then they got paid 100 cents on the dollar, which makes no sense. But isn't that, I mean, why aren't we investigating that? Because that seems like they set up the junk, and then they bet $13 billion against it, and then the real crime is that the American taxpayer paid them.
Right. I mean, look, part of this was companies like AIG, particularly their financial products group, that were foolish enough to offer this protection. In other words, to sell $500 billion worth of credit default swaps against weak mortgage-backed securities that were, as we now know, we're about to go down. I mean, that's why AIG got into so much trouble. Clearly, Goldman encouraged AIG in that, and you're absolutely right. There was something very smelly about when the bailout occurred, the fact that Goldman got paid 100% on the dollar for that. But, I mean, that's the market. AIG was stupid, Goldman was smart. My point is, don't destroy the market, but at least create rules where, all of this has to be disclosed so that people can make intelligent decisions. And I think that's what, what Congress is pushing for.
But wait a minute. But part of the market, Michael, should be that if you make a deal with a company that is not, in good financial shape, well, you're a sophisticated investor, as Goldman keeps saying. You should have known that. And why did the taxpayer pay AIG's bills? We shouldn't pay that at all.
Frankly, it shouldn't. And hopefully, under the current rules, I mean, this is still being debated. If Goldman finds itself in the hole as a counterparty to an AIG that's going down itself, that Goldman be allowed to fail. I mean, that's the whole idea behind this new resolution authority that's going to apply to investment banks and non-banks, other than traditional banks that the FDIC is now authorized to deal with. So, but that's really, I guess the point, of the article that I wrote was that because of all of this changing business, the changing nature of Wall Street and the kind of business they do, where they're basically, Goldman Sachs is basically more a predator on the market. It's not a protector of the financial system. There's no one in the financial system, no firm that has an overall sense of preserving the stability of the system any longer, to the same extent that risk was allegedly dispersed through the bundling and securitization of all these mortgages and other types of assets. To the same extent, a sense of responsibility was dispersed, so you don't have any individual firm, even the most prestigious Goldman, that is thinking about the system. And Congress has to take care of that as well. They have to address that as well. I mean, we simply can't have all of these companies out there preying upon the system with no one having any sense of maintaining it overall. And I think that's, my point is that we have to start talking about that issue as well.
Well, there is an answer to that. I don't know if it'll be an effective answer, and it's certainly not one that's being discussed now as part of the financial reform package, as far as I know, which is that the real problem is that the owners of the companies don't really control the companies anymore. The executives do. And as you point out in the article, the sea change happens when Goldman Sachs goes public. Because, but the key there, Michael, I think, is that that's when their incentives changed. Instead of the incentive of let's protect the bank and let's protect this company because we're partners and owners of this bank and company, their incentive changed to who cares who owns it? It's some sucker shareholder. Let me take out as much money in bonuses as I can.
Precisely. A lot of this is about fixing incentives. On one side, on the defensive side, defending the market and players, that is, it's about creating transparency rules, requiring that all the information that a firm is up to, if it's shorting part of the market, that gets disclosed. But on the other side of it, you're absolutely right, it's fixing the incentives so that you have some reason to hope for the success of these products. And that means, and this is in some of the legislation that's being discussed now, requiring a certain equity stake in a securitization deal, for example. All of that is necessary to prevent a situation where, the stuff is simply bundled and sold, and it becomes not just not a casino, but worse than a casino. I mean, one of the comical moments, at this hearing was to listen to John Ensign of Nevada, who himself is somewhat morally compromised, talk about how this was unfair to casinos, to compare this to casinos, because in fact, what was going on here was Wall Street fixing the deals. The house fixing the deals, even as the bets were placed. I mean, far like a crooked casino. So, they really have to address all of this stuff across the board. And I think the hearings were useful because they really, really did put a focus on what needs to be done in the legislation that's being discussed.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I just wrote an article myself saying, it would be crazy. Nobody in America would say, hey, you know what, we should deregulate the casinos. Take away all the video cameras, Don't do any government checks. Just let them fix the roulette table any way they like. And instead, though, here it's not. Those casinos are peanuts compared to this. The derivatives market
deregulate the casinos, and then put the casinos in charge of the entire American economic system, so that the health of our economy and our country was dependent on a bunch of deregulated casinos. That's essentially what you had over the last decade or so. So yes, that's a good analogy.
And then have the casino create a market like the derivatives market that is $605 trillion, which is 10 times the size of the entire world economy. I mean, how is this not going to blow up? It's almost guaranteed to blow up.
And a great deal of it, let's be frank, had very little to do with economic growth in the end. It was just betting with a few rigged players like Goldman making out like bandits. And I mean, that's great for Goldman's 35,000 employees. They're rich men, most of them, and women. And I guess that adds to the economy, but, it's ridiculously unfair.
Final thing on this, Michael. You mentioned the resolution authority that's in the bill. I don't quite grasp that. I mean, if we have the same kind of situation that we had in '08, where everybody looks like they're going down at the same time because they're so interconnected, what does this resolution authority realistically and practically do? Okay, we're going to put you still got to bail them out, don't you? Or if you don't bail them out,
well, if it's applied right, if it's used right, it will provide a disincentive. If firms know that if they screw up, that they're less likely to be bailed out, and they're more likely to be liquidated, which is what the resolution authority requires. Then presumably that is a fixed incentive. That's an incentive that tells them when we make deals, no matter what level we're at, we have to think about the overall stability of the firm and the overall stability of the financial system, because we don't want to be liquidated. I mean, that's the idea. Whether it's going to work that way, I don't know.
So it actually would mandate that they do what I suggested they do, and Stiglitz did, and everybody did in the beginning in 2008, which is, all right, you're all out of money, and so we're going to liquidate you and just.
I don't know if it requires that. I think that's the option that they have, and one would hope that there would be tough provisions in there that at certain levels of capital inadequacy that the liquidation would just go ahead. But I'm not sure. We don't know what the final language is yet.
Yeah, that's true. Because if it doesn't require it, then that's the same exact situation we were in before.
Right. Exactly.
So, all right. It's a really great article called "Legislating a Conscience on Wall Street." Michael, thanks so much for joining us again.
Thanks. Bye bye.
All right. We'll be right back.